Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. We're going to be talking about Hawkeye and wild speculations, but I do want to mention um, the horribly sad news that the comic industry got today. That comic legend and just super nice guy, George Perez, has been diagnosed with inoperable pancreatic cancer. And while he could do some treatments and stuff, he's choosing not to. So the remainder of his time, he can live it, with somewhat. I mean, cancer treatment is just horrific on the human body, as cancer itself is too. So it's kind of catch-22. But George has chosen to forgo the treatment and just live out his remaining days with his family. And we wish him the best. George is super talented, super nice. I've met him a couple times. I know a lot of people that speak so highly of him, his incredible work. We will do a tribute show for him soon, but I just wanted to acknowledge it. I know a lot of people in the industry are reeling right now from this news, and my heart goes out to everybody because George has touched so many people's lives with his, like I said, with his talent, but also with just how incredibly nice and generous and just, yeah. So thank you, Mr. Perez, for everything. All right, let's move on. And we're going to do Hawkeye speculations today, being that we're 3 episodes in of a 6-episode series. And since we're at the halfway point, it seems like a good idea. And I've got some ideas for wild speculation. And if you're wondering why I have this figure right here, A, because I figure it's a good piece for the show. B, I'm hoping that I can now use it as a tax write-off. And C, hey, Sideshow, I'll be happy to put up others if you send them to me. I mean, I've got a good collection back there, and I'm even ready for tomorrow's show about Daredevil coming back to the MCU. But there's some figures I don't have. You definitely send them over to me, Sideshow, if you want. I will talk about them greatly on the show and how much of a fan I am of the Hot Toys line you guys put out. So, all right. So let's get into wild speculation. Now, this is going to be the assumption that you have seen up through episode 3. So if you have not seen episode 3, and you want to bail out, you can catch this on YouTube later on the Experiences YouTube channel. But Kyle, our producer, is currently watching episode 3 while the show's going on because he hasn't had a chance to see it yet. So, but we are going to talk wild speculations. And I got, let me see, how many did I come up with? I think I've got 10. So yeah, 10 wild speculations. This should carry us through the hour pretty well. Now, there was word out today from TV Line that the 5th episode of Hawkeye may just blow up Twitter a bit. Now, this is coming off the news that Kevin Feige confirmed. He didn't confirm that Daredevil will be showing up in Spider-Man No Way Home or Matt Murdock. He didn't confirm that he's going to show up in She-Hulk or the Echo series, as a lot of speculation has been. But he confirmed that when we see Daredevil or Matt Murdock in the MCU, it's going to be Charlie Cox. It's going to be the same actor from the Netflix series. Well, that goes, of course, with, what about the other characters? There's this famous quote, or not famous, but often referred to quote from Kevin Feige a while ago, who said that he loved Charlie Cox, Kristen Ritter, Vincent D'Onofrio, and John Bernthal from the Netflix series. Now, he didn't mention anybody else. He didn't say there was anybody he didn't like. He didn't talk about other cast members. Those were the 4 names he gave. So it's pretty good assumption that if you're bringing back one of them, then if those actors are available, he's probably going to bring back the other ones as well, at least when they pertain to Daredevil. So, all right. So then let's get to the first speculation, and this has to do with that. Can't do it. Oh, well, I'll watch 3 and 4 tomorrow. Okay. I think most of this stuff is going to be okay for you, Kyle. Because I don't get into too many spoilers about the 3rd episode, but just some of the setup. So, all right. So the first obvious one we've got to talk about is the large hand in the room. We see the hand reaching on young Echo's cheek in the 3rd episode, and referred to as Uncle. This mysterious Uncle character is introduced in episode 3. Now, we don't get to see his face, but we see good-sized male hand, and we see cufflinks on a very nice suit. And when he walks, it's a very heavy walk. Now, you could probably go many different directions, but my first wild speculation is, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of people who will disagree with this one, it's Kingpin. It's Wilson Fisk, and it's Vincent D'Onofrio. Now, this character makes a lot of sense. The character-wise, he's pivotal to the origin of Echo. In the comics, he's in business with and orders the death of Maya's father, then raises Maya as his own and sends her to all the best schools and training her to be an assassin and to utilize her power. But this happens when Maya is young in the comics, while William's death takes place with a grown-up Maya in the Hawkeye series. So there is that big shift, She's already grown up. She's already had the training, but Uncle has been a factor in her life. So, but the key thing here is that she goes from being a bad guy assassin to being kind of a hero or anti-hero when she is told by Fisk that Daredevil killed her father. He sends her to meet Matt Murdock, and then at another point he tells her, not knowing that Murdock is Daredevil, tells her that Daredevil is the one that killed her father, sends her after Daredevil, and Matt Murdock is actually able to convince her that he didn't have anything to do with her father's death, and that Kingpin actually made it happen or did the killing. And this is the flip the character goes through that takes her from being the assassin to being, a hero, or at least, an anti-hero. It's hard to justify the word hero nowadays, but, she becomes the character that could actually lead her own series. And I think with the Echo series being announced, that introducing Fisk now makes a lot of sense, because they're replacing the Daredevil role in this in a way with Hawkeye. They're not doing the romantic aspect of it, which was a big part of the comic. But then all women fall in love with Matt Murdock. If you haven't noticed it, that's just a thing. He's Elektra, Typhoid Mary, Black Widow, Karen Page, Heather the Socialite. I mean, just down the line. And Maya Lopez. Matt Murdock is just the ladies' man of the Marvel Universe. But here, Hawkeye is happily married. He's more of a father figure at this point, and his role is very different here. But the arc is a little different now. At this point, there's really only two characters that have any emotional tie that Uncle could be. Now, Uncle could be, and Fisk's connection is from what we know about Echo, from the comics and stuff, and how Marvel likes to keep the spirit of the story, if not the full story. But the only other person that could be Uncle and would have an emotional emphasis to it would be if it's Kate's father. You know, if it's Kate's father, who we believe to be dead, Derek. But the hand doesn't seem right for Brian D'Arcy James. And the character of Derek seemed to really love his daughter. I couldn't see him just abandoning her for money or something, just giving up all that and going into hiding or whatever it is, and not really good hiding. I mean, you know, if he's hanging out at a karate gym and wearing suits, I mean, it just seems like it seems kind of much for that character. So I think, well, I really do think that it's going to be Vincent D'Onofrio. D'Onofrio even came out yesterday and congratulated Charlie Cox on, you know, being connected to the MCU again. So I think everything points to it being Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. The conversation Hawkeye has with Kate about the Tracksuit Mafia and how there's a guy at the top, and he specifically says he and guy, a male gender. So it really comes down to that. I think all signs point that it's going to be Wilson Fisk and it's going to be Vincent D'Onofrio. And if you're Marvel, why on earth would you not bring Vincent D'Onofrio back for this role? This role, he kind of made it his own in the Netflix series. And I'm going to talk about all this stuff tomorrow. Tomorrow's show is going to be about the Daredevil announcement and the Netflix series and what they can do to bring him over from the MCU. How much do they bring? What characters they should bring? What characters probably won't come over? We'll have an open discussion about that. But just sticking with this today, it would be odd for them to bring Charlie Cox back and not Vincent D'Onofrio, since D'Onofrio has said he would come back. Now, John Bernthal has also said he would come back, but he doesn't want to come back if it's a like Peach, you know, a toned down kitty version of the Punisher. He wants that Netflix level Punisher. So yeah, that's the thought on Uncle, that it's going to be Wilson Fisk. It's going to be Vincent D'Onofrio, because it just makes a lot of sense. It goes with all the rumors we've been hearing for months. It goes with some of the things. I mean, D'Onofrio's on there talking about, you know, showing, linking to clips for Hawkeye saying, oh, this is going to be so much fun, but never coming out and saying, I'm in it. So I think we're pretty much at a point where he's going to show up. Now, that 5th episode, will this be his debut, or will that be Yelena Belova's view, when we know Yelena's coming? But I think the 5th episode is where we'll get Wilson Fisk. It makes the most sense that he'll pop up in 5 as a cameo, and then he'll be in 6 a little bit, maybe just a tiny bit, but enough that we know it's him. So that's what I think. Let's move on to wild speculation number 2, and that is that Jack Duquesne is a SHIELD agent that knows Clint. Now, this again, wild speculation, but in the comic, Jacques Duquesne, Jacques in the comics, Jack on the TV show, Jacques Duquesne was a circus performer whose act included a mastery of knives, swords, and other bladed weapons. He had someone else in the circus named Trick Shot, who I believe later on we find out is actually Clint's older brother. But that's Trick Shot's in the circus as well. And the reason I mention him is at one point, Duquesne meets Clinton Barton, a young boy or young kid who he sees a lot of potential in, and along with Trick Shot, they teach him archery and blades and all this other stuff. Now, Clint becomes kind of part of Duquesne's act. But this ends when Clint discovers that Duquesne had robbed the ticket booth at the circus because of his gambling debts. Now, we don't have any of that set up here in the MCU. We never learn how Hawkeye found archery, how it became his thing, what his training is, who trained him. We don't learn any of that. And so there really isn't the mentor setup here like he had in the comics. And there's also an age difference that doesn't really work for it, as Jeremy Renner is 50 and Tony Dalton's only 46. Now, 4 years is not a huge age difference, but if you're going to do a mentor role, normally the mentor is quite a bit older. In this case, the mentor would be younger. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but the mentor relationship really won't work, but them coming together in S.H.I.E.L.D. would make a lot of sense. Like maybe they came up together in S.H.I.E.L.D. and where Hawkeye was an archer guy, Duquesne was a sword guy, and they kind of got paired off and different things like that. I could see them having a backstory like that. And why do I think he's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent? They've tried really hard to make Duquesne as suspect as possible. But what if his over-the-top buffoonish behavior is a cover to make people underestimate him? With how the third episode ends, we get Jack and Clint alone for a minute. So they could have that moment of acknowledging each other before Kate comes in the room. Clint sees him. He's not going to blow his cover, but now he knows something else is going on. Or maybe before they can really talk, Eleanor shows up or something, and Jack goes back into his act. So I could see this happening. Now, Marvel Studios likes to pull from the comics, but not exactly. They focus more on the spirit of the story than necessarily the actual events. Now, having Jack and Clint know each other, it keeps the spirit of the story. It keeps the fact that they've got this past. And it feels like they need to have this past because we're 3 episodes in and they haven't come. I mean, the first time we see them together is the last second of the show. So it almost feels like they've kept them apart for a reason. Now, I know there hasn't really been a chance for them to meet. But, she never really says anything other than my mother's fiance and Jack. So, Humbug Kyle, the spirit of the story. Kyle wants them to do exact adaptations, which I don't think would ever work, but that's what he likes. So if you're doing Civil War, he wants to see the full Civil War story, not a MCU version of it watered down. Now, so having Jack and Clint, like I said, know each other kind of keeps the spirit of the story. Plus, Jack could be working undercover for another agency. So when S.H.I.E.L.D. broke apart and they all went different directions, Jack could have ended up working for the CIA or the FBI, who are having him infiltrate Eleanor's connections are to crime. Because it does seem like she's somehow connected to crime at this point. She's not exactly squeaky clean. She's kind of suspect too. So that's a possibility. I think, I really do think that perhaps Jack is more than he appears. Now, let's stick with Jack and go another step further. another number 3 on my speculation list, Jack Duquesne is the one who killed Maya's father and the rest of the Tracksuit Mafia. Now, this and the next thing on my speculation list are both under the same assumption as area, that it wasn't Clint in the Ronin suit that killed Maya's father. And that's because the reason I believe that is that it's not Clint in the origin of Echo. I wrote notes here and it doesn't make sense. If it's not Clint, then the origin of Echo involves Kingpin being William Crazy Horse. All right. So in the comics, Kingpin is partners with Crazy Horse, William Lopez. He's called Crazy Horse in the comics. And he orders, it's not Clint that kills him. He orders his death, and I believe Kingpin might even kill him himself. And Crazy Horse makes Kingpin promise that he'll take care of Maya. So Fisk is a man of his word at that point. He raises Maya, gets her into all the right schools and trains her to be an assassin, sends her after Daredevil, blah, blah, blah. We talked about that before, but now with Daredevil is rumored to be coming into the MCU and possibly in her solo series, it feels like having Clint be the killer of William would take away Maya's redemption arc. And that's what I was talking about earlier. For her to have her own series, I think she needs to make that flip. She needs to basically become an anti-hero. And if Clint is the one that killed him, it kind of takes that motivation away from her, and it really kind of makes him out to be a bad guy here. Now, even though William was a criminal, we've humanized him with him talking, the way he interacted with her. And once you humanize a character, killing them becomes, it's more than just killing the bad guys. So it puts this cloud over Clint if he is the one that killed him. And I realize that Ronin killed a lot of people, but they were all very bad people, and we don't get that redemption note. Here, William gets a bit of redemption because of the way he is with his daughter. So, you feel bad for Maya and what she's gone through, and having lost William, Clint killing him would really put a cloud over him. Now, if Uncle is Wilson Fisk, it would make sense for him to use someone else in the costume to kill his partners that he wants to get rid of. Also, Jack has the skills to do the stuff that Ronin does. His skills with a sword, it makes him a viable candidate to be Ronin. And, we don't get a real idea of when William's death happens, how long ago. That's the other thing that's interesting, is we get Maya in 2007 as a kid, and then we get an adult Maya who looks exactly like she does now. There doesn't appear to be that much difference. So we really don't know when William's death takes place, how long ago. Was this after the return, after the snap? Could they have already recovered the Ronin suit from Avengers Compound and then used it? So maybe that's what happened, is that they got the suit, they used it, and then they were auctioning it off after the fact. This might have happened recently. They don't give us a time frame of how long William has been dead and that Maya is in charge. So it's possible that Ronin killed, or that the death of William is well after Clint stopped being Ronin. Now, it's possible that it happened during the time he was Ronin. But Fisk could have put anybody in a ninja costume and had them pretend to be Ronin. We don't really get a very clear-cut picture of it. And it happens very quickly. So it's from Maya's point of view, moving around and a lot of action. So it is possible that it's not Clint in the suit. And I think it's important that it's not Clint in the suit. Because, like I said, I think that takes away Echo's redemption arc and puts a cloud over Clint because of the way we met William. We didn't meet William as a bad guy who happened to have a kid. Then we just feel bad for the kid. we met William as a loving father, and then, we never saw William do anything bad. We never saw William commit a crime. We just know he's part of the Tracksuit Mafia and Ronan killed him. So that the way it's presented, I don't see them. It makes it difficult for Clint to come out of this looking like a good guy. And it makes the flip difficult as well. So I think that it's going to come down that somebody else is in the Ronin suit. And something else you'll notice when you watch Jack fence and Jack hold the sword against Clint's throat, he's left-handed, just like Clint. So the Ronin, had the fill-in Ronin or the fake Ronin been right-handed, it would have been obvious. But both actors or both characters are left-handed, so the ruse continues. That it could be Jack, but it could still be Clint. So that's where the speculation is on that. I don't think they can make it Clint that killed William and still stick to somewhat of Echo's origin story. I don't think Clint could come out of this being a hero. I think it's going to be a bumpy enough one when, Natasha or when Yelena shows up and has evidence that he's Ronin. That's going to shake things up. I just don't think him actually having killed William fits the tone of this series. No matter how bad of things he did, they're all faceless bad guys. There's all he's a hero, they're bad guys. He just crossed a line. When you put a face to it, the loving father face of William, you suddenly turn that much more towards Clint being the bad guy. So, all right. We are coming up to the halfway point. Before I get started on my fourth one that also involves Ronin, let's go ahead and take a quick break. Kyle should be listening, so stick around. We will be right back with more speculation.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are doing Wild speculations for Hawkeye, since we are halfway point of the series. We get another episode tonight/tomorrow. So today seemed like the perfect day to do speculations. Now, coming off the last one, we're going to go into the fourth one right away. And maybe Bullseye was in the Ronin costume. That last speculation could be half right. And maybe Jack isn't the guy in the Ronin costume, but Fisk used someone different in the Ronin costume. And if they're bringing back Vincent D'Onofrio and they're bringing back Charlie Cox, who's to say they're not bringing back Wilson Bethel as Benjamin Poindexter, a.k.a. Bullseye? Fisk had him dressed like Daredevil in the third season of the Netflix series, so it's a trick we know Fisk already likes to use. Now, this is completely dependent on Uncle Bean Fisk and that them bringing back D'Onofrio. But at this point, it's hard to believe that they aren't doing just that. Now, Bullseye could easily pull off all the moves we saw Ronin doing. And I believe Bullseye is supposed to be ambidextrous. So he could use the sword in the left hand without any issues at all. Now, I wouldn't put big money on this being the case. This is probably my least likely of all the speculations. But it's possible. Now, the reason I think it's not that likely is because they've introduced Echo. They're bringing in Yelena Belova. We got whoever Uncle turns out to be. Plus, we're already introducing Kate Bishop and her family. That's a lot going on there. And then to throw in somebody as big as Bullseye would be kind of a huge move to try to do in a 6-issue series, especially since we're halfway through. But, you know, Marvel uses D'Onofrio as Fisk here. If the Netflix series will be, you know, we don't know. I mean, just because we don't know if them using Charlie Cox and D'Onofrio again makes that series canon, or if they're just going to bring in some of the actors and say, okay, well, none of that happened, but these characters and they're connected. We'll just kind of lay out his story as we go. So there's nothing to say that Bullseye isn't already introduced, but there's nothing that says he isn't, or he is already introduced. So I think Bullseye is a possibility, but probably not a strong one from a storytelling point of view. All right, let's move on to the fifth one here. And I think a lot of people are going to agree with me on this one. Eleanor Bishop is evil, or criminal, or crooked. And maybe she's even Madame Mask. Now, Eleanor has seemed suspect since the very beginning of this series. And it seems awfully convenient that all of their financial problems go away when Kate's dad dies. You know? And she's in the middle of the argument with him and goes down to see him right before the attack in New York, and then suddenly he's dead. We don't see the body. We don't see anything like that. And then later on, we meet her again. She's being threatened by Armand, and suddenly Armand's dead. So she's very suspect. And then you throw in her attitude about charity. It kind of contradicts her humble upbringings that she's told us about multiple times, how she didn't grow up rich, And we've seen that she's got some skills. She can flip a carrot up off a plate into her mouth. And it kind of looked like from the opening credits that maybe she taught Kate how to do archery. I mean, she had a trainer for everything else, but it seemed like Vera was the one standing over, or Eleanor was the one standing over her during her archery training. So now, but one of the biggest things has to be the casting of Vera Farmiga. Now, you know, suddenly she's got dark hair. Now, I know she plays sometimes dark, sometimes blonde, but she's got the dark hair, and it's got that page cut, or whatever they call it, page boy cut, that is very reminiscent of the Madame Mask character. You know, and you put a gold mask on her, she's going to look like the character. Now, Madame Mask in the comics, Kate's mother is presumed dead, and her father turns out to be connected to crime. So maybe we're getting the flip here. And also, Madame Mask is a recurring villain for Kate, which would be even more impactful if it was her own mother. If she doesn't know, but the audience does, that would be pretty awesome. Now, and do you cast someone like Vera Farmiga just to play somewhat small role? I mean, we really haven't had a lot of time with Eleanor. Usually it's offset by the larger-than-life Jack Duquesne. Now, again, I think she's crooked. She possibly killed Derek, and she might have a gold mask sitting somewhere in the house. The character of Madame Mask was... Now, the Madame Mask has been introduced in the MCU. She was introduced in Agent Carter, and Marvel has said that Agent Carter is canon. So at least the first season. I don't know about the second season. But according to the story of the Marvel Universe, or the story of Marvel Studios, Agent Carter was their production, and it's canon. But that version of Madame Mask was set in the 1940s. So it's possible that mask got handed down and ended up in Eleanor's possession. Or, they could do that route, or they could just make it a completely new character that just, happened to use the same name. Now, they spent so much time pointing fingers at Jack, but it was Eleanor that Armand III threatened, and we don't know if she even told that to Jack, Plus, she seems like the type that would kill Armand with a sword just so authorities would think that it was Jack instead of her, Got all these swords around the house. Her boyfriend's obsessed with swords. She kills her boyfriend or her fiance's uncle with a sword. It seems like maybe she's just being safe and possibly pointing the directions at Jack. So I really don't get the feeling that Jack is the bad guy here. He's just kind of buffoonish and over the top. So I think he's either hiding something or... No, I just think he's hiding something. All right. Moving on to number 6. Number 6 is that when Yelena shows up, and we know she's going to show up, she will reveal that Clint was Ronin and cause a rift between he and Kate. Now, we know that Yelena Belova, Florence Pugh, has a photo of Clint in the Ronin suit with the mask off. This was given to her by Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character, at the end of Black Widow's movie. We also know that the showrunner has confirmed that Yelena will be appearing in the series, saying he had to actually beg to get the character in the show, and that's where that ending scene came from. Now, Clint has been careful not to say anything about who Ronin is. He even dodged saying anything when Kate specifically talked about him, not saying who Ronin was because it's someone close to him. And he has to keep their secret. But Kate idolizes Clint. And while she may not quite understand all that Ronin did, the horror will be amplified by Yelena accusing him of causing Natasha's death. And then you've got Maya saying Ronin killed her father. I don't know exactly how the Yelena character will be brought in. There's a teaser clip of someone wearing a mask with night vision goggles on that's very similar to Yelena's costume from Thunderbolts. And in the clip, it appears that that person may be tracking Clint and Kate. So how she's brought in is going to be a really big part. But the big question might be, how will Yelena react to the initial information Val gave her? Because Val said that Clint is responsible for Natasha's death. But in the Black Widow movie, Val also spends time with Natasha, who talks about Clint, and shows Yelena the hidey hole that they hid in for a couple days after the assassination attempt on, I can't remember the villain's name from Black Widow, but after that. So they hid out in the roof of a subway thing. So Natasha definitely came across like there was this special feeling for her and Clint, that there was this really strong friendship. So would Yelena immediately assume the worst and come in guns a-blazing, or would she come in and try to scope things out, find out what's going on and get a chance to talk to Clint. I kind of think that's the second. I think she's going to be more cautious. And does she trust Val? Does anybody trust Val? Should anybody trust Val? So those are all some really good questions. So I have a feeling that she may come in more quietly and to find out what happened with Natasha, but the information she brings will still shake Kate's faith in Clint. And so I think that's how it's going to play, because right now Kate worships Clint, and this information will bring him down a few pegs in her mind. So I think Yelena's introduction will be interesting and shake up the relationship between our two leads. And I think that's probably coming in episode 4. Yeah, because I think episode 5 is going to be the Kingpin reveal. So I think we'll get Yelena in episode 4. All right, moving on to my 7th piece of speculation. Kate will end up spending Christmas with the Bartons. Now, this whole series is about Clint getting home to his family. But there's been a lot of people that have talked about how Clint might die at the end of the series. I can't see that happening. It doesn't fit the tone of the series, and just how many original Avengers are we supposed to watch die? I think we've had enough. I think either Clint is going to get home, or Laura is going to bring the kids to New York to spend Christmas with him. So one way or the other, he's going to be with his kids Christmas morning. It has to be. You've created the ticking clock. You've done that type of show. You can't end on a downer that Clint doesn't make it. So let's move our focus to Kate, who is likely to have her entire family turned upside down by the end of this series. And we really don't see her having too many other people in her life besides her mother, and then her friend Greer, who she hasn't talked to since she left the school. I mean, there's been no contact from Greer or anything. And they gave her the name Greer, which is a nod to Tigra. But, they really haven't done anything with that character in 3 episodes since. So I think Kate will likely be out on her own by the end of this. And Hawkeye will take her home with her. So it's kind of a Lethal Weapon thing type ending, where Riggs ends up joining Murtaugh and the family for the holidays. I think we end the series with Kate being accepted into the Barton family, and that would make a lot of sense with how close Laura and Natasha also seem to be. There's obviously a lot of trust between Clint and his wife, and I could see her being the type that says, if she doesn't have a family on the holidays, then you bring her here. So I expect to see her and Lucky the pizza dog on the farm as the show ends. So I think the series will end with Clint, Kate, and Lucky getting home for Christmas, because really that is the only thing that makes sense. Again, it could be completely, Eleanor could be completely innocent, Jack could be completely innocent. There's a lot of possibility, but come on, that's the way it seems to be going, doesn't it? All right, moving on to number 8. Number 8 is having to do also with the speculation that Clint's going to die, or he won't be Hawkeye anymore. I think Clint's role in the MCU is going to change, but he will continue in the MCU. I think he's going to end up being a mentor figure to not only Kate, but to the young Avengers. Clint is definitely past his best days. The damage of his hearing loss makes him a little less effective as an operative. Yeah, he can train around it, but he's beaten up. He's just a human with a bow and arrow. He's extremely well trained, but how much damage can he take? He's 50 some odd years old, and it's just getting to him. There's this whole new wave of young kids coming up. It just seems to fit. And they've been setting up. I mean, and who is he working for now? There really isn't an Avengers team, and there is no Shield anymore. I mean, maybe he's going to work for Sword, but now they've been setting him up for a mentor role for a while now. He's the one that brought in Natasha. You know, instead of just taking her out as he was ordered, he saw something in her. He brought her in. He gave Wanda the pep talk and basically told her, you know, in Age of Ultron, that if you go out there and fight, you're an Avenger, and gave her that thing that got Wanda to go out and fight. So they've been kind of moving in that direction. And then he's already begrudgingly kind of showing Kate the ropes, you know, how to bandage herself, the trick arrows, the stuff like that. Now Jeremy Renner has said in interviews that he'd like to see Hawkeye take a leadership role, like in the comics when he leads the West Coast Avengers. Well, I don't think we're going to end up with two Avenger team, you know, bi-coastal Avenger thing going on. And the MCU has been getting a lot of members of the Young Avengers lately. With Kate, there's Ant-Man's daughter Cassie growing up and being recast. We get Billy and Tommy that were introduced in WandaVision. We got Eli introduced in The Falcon and Winter Soldier. We also got Kid Loki. And then they introduced us to Joaquin in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Now, he's not part of the Young Avengers, but he ends up in the comics taking on the persona of the Falcon when Sam Wilson becomes Captain America, and he could fit into a Young Avengers team as well. I mean, because they haven't introduced the Hulkling or the young version of Kang yet, Iron Lad, but most of the other characters have all been kind of introduced. And I could see Hawkeye being a mentor figure for that group. It makes a lot of sense. No, not the Clint from the comics. I'm talking about the Clint that we get, the father figure mentor that we've been getting in the MCU. And if you're wondering if they're going to be moving forward with the Young Avengers, there was a report out today that Haley Steinfeld has been seen in England on the set of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, I believe that just wrapped filming, so this report must be a little bit old, but Ant-Man and the Wasp also is where Catherine Newton has come in and taken over as Cassie Lang, also known as Stature, in the comics. So perhaps they're already going to connect Kate and Cassie, so we start moving forward with the Young Avengers, start connecting these young heroes together. So that'll be interesting. I wonder if that means Clint will show up in there as well. Find out how he got the Pymtech arrow. Love the Pymtech arrow. We're going to get to that. All right. We got two more speculations here, and I need to get going quickly so we can wrap this up with about 10 minutes left to go. Number 9 on the thing is the Watch, the Watch from the Avengers compound. My guess is the Watch will end up being Stark Tech and lead to Armor Wars. At this point in the series, the Watch is basically a MacGuffin, only there to give a reason for the Tracksuit Mafia to hit the auction. But Hawkeye says in the 3rd episode that it'd be troubling to think that there are things from Avengers compound out there, and the Watch was important enough to risk going after it instead of just bidding on it. So this was something that somebody wanted so bad. And of course, if it's the Tracksuit Mafia, then it's Uncle who's running the show, which again, we think is Wilson Fisk. So I could see him, going after the Watch, but somebody had to have it. Only a few things can be that powerful and fit into a watch. And unless its value comes from a sentimental place, then I think the odds are that it's filled with Stark nanites. It could be the start of a suit, something like that. And there's too much going on in the series to deal with that in just 3 more episodes and still wrap up everything else like Echo, Yelena, Ronan, Uncle. So I believe that the Watch will be used to set up a different series. And which would make the most sense? Armor Wars. An entire series about James Rhodes tracking down his best friend's technology as it's fallen into the wrong hands. This makes a lot of sense. And it might also tie into the Power Broker from Falcon and Winter Soldier, so connecting multiple dots from series here. I could see Fisk actually trying to get the watch and then selling it to the power broker or something like that to create this new access to tech. Or maybe Fisk has in mind for something else. All I know is that, could you imagine Wilson Fisk with like the big Iron Man gauntlet on? That would be cool. But the way I look at it is that the watch was introduced and was important, but they've done nothing with it since. So the odds are it's going to carry over into a future Marvel property, because I really can't see them taking the time to solve this part of the problem when it's only been backdoor mentioned a couple times. Kate doesn't know there was a watch. Clint doesn't know there was a watch. We only know there's a watch. So this is for us, not for the heroes, for the protagonists. So keep that in mind. The watch will probably end up in another series. And then we get to the 10th and final wild speculation for the halfway point of Hawkeye. It has to do with Ant-Man. Now, the reason Ant-Man is in Rogers the Musical is because in Endgame, Ant-Man went back in time and someone probably saw him there. He was at the Battle of New York, not the original one. He went back to the Battle of New York. And even if somebody just glimpsed him for a second, they would assume that he's shrunk down and doing his thing the rest of the time. So it is possible that the world thinks Ant-Man was there because Scott Lang did go back in time to that point and could have been seen, in which case it makes everybody think he was at the Battle of New York. But also there's there's the Pym arrow. Well, there's a connection between the two characters, as in the comics. Hawkeye once took on the name Goliath and used Pym particles to grow, when replacing Giant Man on the Avengers. Now, sadly, he didn't grow his arrows with him, but the use of Pym particles to grow the giant arrow in the third episode is kind of a nod to his time as Goliath. And we've seen Hawkeye's the one that went out and got Scott Lang and brought him to Germany. So they had that time to get to know each other. They do the Ant-Man on the tip of the arrow fire thing that is literally from a comic cover. And when they were in the raft together, I believe their cells were next to each other. So they were both released on house arrest so they could go back to their families or just get out of prison. So it's possible that these two have created a friendship. And that would be neat to see play out too, because we don't get much of that connection. We see the Tony, Steve dynamic and Steve and Bucky and stuff like that. But some of these other characters, we really don't see the dynamics that take place outside of the big movies. So it would be very interesting to see if they've built this friendship, how Hawkeye got the arrow, stuff like that. And that might come up some point in the series. I doubt it. It might also come up in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania if Haley Steinfeld's there, maybe Jeremy Renner's there. Maybe there's going to be a scene or something that explains the connection. But I think it's fascinating, and I love the idea that Hank Pym made an arrow for Hawkeye. I love that. Still my favorite scene in the series so far, just that giant arrow. But all right, folks, that are my 10 speculations. So you can write them down, see how many of them come true. That Wilson Fisk, Vincent D'Onofrio will be Uncle. That Jack Duquesne is more than a buffoonish clown, that he probably knows Clint from the past, possibly as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. That it's likely he is the Ronin that killed Maya's father. Back up to that is that Bullseye is the Ronin, but my first guess would be Jack. Eleanor Bishop is evil, maybe even Madame Mask. Yelena Belova will show up, and that picture will cause a rift between Kate and Clint. That will then, of course, be repaired as they go into the finale, and everybody will be fine. Kate's going to end up spending Christmas with the Bartons. Clint will stick around at the end of this and become kind of a mentor to the Young Avengers, and that the Watch will end up being the start of the Stark tech that gets out that Armor Wars ends up dealing with. That is my speculation. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Stick around. I know right after this is Black Comic Universe. And then we're going to be having a Minute to Skim It with Miss Jen, going through some of the new books of the week. And then I will be back with Kyle, producer Kyle, and we'll be talking about some of the new books coming out this week that we've had a chance to read, give you our thoughts on them, including Dot Self #2, Nyx #2 from Dynamite, James Bond Humeros #3, Buffy the Last Vampire Slayer #1. There's some good books in this list, so you'll want to check it out. Come back here at 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern. We'll be back for that. Stick around for Black Comic Universe coming up right now. See you tomorrow to talk MCU, bringing Daredevil back. Have a good night, everybody.